Hello and welcome back to another Final Fantasy TCG video. Today we're going to be talking about our first impressions for Fire for Opus 4, but before we get into that, I want to talk about a very special announcement. Now, if you're in the Final Fantasy TCG US group, or if you've been on LogNet recently, you've maybe already have seen this announcement. I am going to be TOing up some events across the United States. The ones confirmed right now are this beautiful banner you see below in Orlando and Vegas, and there is a Midwest event coming in February that I hope to bring more events to the Final Fantasy community. For those that may not know my full backstory or kind of the other games I've been involved with, I was the head judge for Force of Will for a year and a half about, probably worked over a dozen events of 200, 300 player regionals and got some firsthand experience through that. So I do want to say that I am coming to this with everything that I've learned with partnering with ARG and both the Force of Will team over the past about three to 4 years I've been doing this. So there is a lot of work that's going into this, and there is many years of experience as well. So I really want you guys to pre-reg with confidence. We will not cancel this event no matter what. So please understand that if you pre-reg, if you buy your plane tickets, you buy your hotel, this event is happening. I don't care if we get 12 people to start or if we cap out at 64. That is the other thing I do want to mention. By the time this video goes live, either tonight or tomorrow, the pre-reg link will be available. I want to say how thankful I am to ARG for allowing us to do this, but it is on a trial basis to see how the first two events go. So if they cap out within, say, hours as we might expect for the Florida event, Vegas, honestly, I have no clue, but I'm expecting Florida will cap out. We will have more seating for future events, but it's very important that you guys show your support to, I guess, LogNet in this case, and ARG for capping out these events. And I am working on some very special prizing as well I think you'll really enjoy. So all of that out of the way, I know what you really want to talk about is some fire cards for Opus 4. So I hope you guys enjoyed the pre-release weekend. Unfortunately, I've been traveling the past 2 weekends. I'm actually traveling next weekend as well, so I haven't had a chance yet, but I'm very excited to get my hands on these cards and start brewing. And first we have Win, which is a card I've already talked about kind of at length in one of our Sage Suggestions videos, so I really won't go too much into this card here. I think it's great if you can build a World of Final Fantasy deck. That's going to make this deck shine, probably play Phoenix as well. Outside of that, I'd probably see zero play. Let's be honest, you need World of Final Fantasy characters to really make this card shine, so I will be looking forward to a deck based around that. We have yet another 2-drop Red Mage. Pay a Fire Crystal Point, tap, choose a forward during this turn, increase damage dealt to it by 1,000. So this is great because it'll help you get around those Minwu based effects, because there's some other ping effects that we've noticed, so I think Minwu is still going to be very playable, but it's a way to, you know, without having to use maybe the Palm card to trade up damage on both sides, it's a one-directional way. So the interesting thing here is that it is a 2-drop, which Red already has way more than enough of, and you really only need one of these in play. Now, we could live some dream where we get to make the other Red Mage cards from Opus 3 playable, but that's a bit of a stretch. Overall, I think this card will see play in a 1-2-2 count in red decks. I don't think it's at all, you know, game breaking or anything like that, but I think it is a card that many red players will want to consider. Speaking of mono fire variants, at least we have Ivrit. 2-cost EX Burst, which is always nice to see. Choose a 4, deal 4,000 damage. So 2 for 4,000, maybe not the greatest, but it will take it. If you control 5 or more fire characters, so that's forwards and backups, deal at 7,000 damage instead. So immediately we can see that this is a card that wants us to be forced into these mono fire strategies, which, again, guys, new format. Quote me now, I'm sure we'll see fire decks doing well at the start, or any mono decks in general, so this would be a card that you want to consider when you're building mono fire. That a 2-cost 7,000 ping, you know, it's basically a cheaper Brynhilde in this case, even though it is more situational, it's not that hard to get to 5 characters. So I think that this will be a staple in the mono fire decks if you can find room for it in the summon package, because we have, you know, Belias, Bahamut's getting better with the legendary that we're going to be talking about. There's a lot of value, and the new 4-drop Bahamut actually is insane, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I think you will find some copies. It might just be 1, might be 2, but EX Burst, great for 7,000 damage. I think it has potential. Then we have Edgar, first hero lining up. So 5-cost, 7,000, so a little bit there, but it is an EX Burst. So when it enters the field, you may search for 1 card, Sabin, and add it to your hand. Now, when we get to Sabin in a bit, card's insane. So I'm just assuming that you're going to be wanting to play both of these because, one, that the drill effect is insane. Just choose a forward and break it for the special, so that's fine. And Sabin also has a card that you want to be using. The interesting note here, though, is that it also has this kind of ping effect to lead into that red aggressive strategy. So choose a 4, deal a 2,000 damage. What this allows you to do is what we've seen from those mono wind variants on the defensive, respectively, when they had Deuce and maybe you're trading with your Pains, is you can now be aggressive and now have both Selfie and this to threaten a potential 4K trade up, assuming they don't have Minimal or Larsa in the field to make his effect live. But it makes your other 2 drops very scary. So the fact that it's going to be a 3-cost 7K with an S and a tap ability, I am all for this card. I think 100% it is going to see play, and because the awesome special effect, it's definitely going to be a 3 of. So very much looking forward to seeing where this card goes. Speaking of cards on the other end of the spectrum where I think just aren't going anywhere, and I could be terribly wrong, you know, playing a backup for free can certainly be great, but 6-cost Garland. It costs way too much. It's only a 9K. Honestly, they could have made it a 10K, and I think it would have been fine. But when it enters the field, you may play 1 fire backup of cost 3 or less from your hand onto the field tall. So sure, probably one of the better things they're doing here is playing Irvine, or I believe Black Waltz is also 3, where you can get a maybe free kill spell out of this, in the sense that you're playing this just big body. You know, you can treat it as a 3-cost 9K, maybe killing something, but your 5 and 6 drop slots are already so congested with Emperor Zonde or some of the other cards we're going to be talking about here later on, that it's very hard to find room for this card, and it costing 6 has put you in an awkward spot as well. So you either want to get to 4 backups, and you're only discarding 1 card, and then you're playing your 5th backup, which feels bad unless you have something else that breaks itself, or you have 2 backups, discarding 2 cards, and then playing the 3rd one from your hand, so you're just exhausting your complete hand with the resources. Now again, it is 9,000 body. We have Selfie, all the other cards I talked about, Blaya, sure, that can help you give a little bit more value into this. But again, overall, I think our spots are just too congested for this card. Caius. Now this is the one, and I believe that's how to pronounce it, is something I am absolutely excited for. Enter the field, search for a card named Bahamut. So we have a legendary Bahamut, which is just going to be amazing for reasons that we'll talk about a little bit later with Shadow, but we have a new Bahamut, which I believe is also going to be insane, because it has the potential to remove that character. Instead of going to the break zone, it gets removed from the game instead, so it gets you to kill things like Renoa. So it just tutors up a card that you would want to find in that situation, and allows us to maybe only cut back to 2 Bahamuts of the legendary variety, so we can tutor it up when we need to do it. Now, so in this case, you'd be a 4-drop 9K, but it's also that other effect. So when you attack, choose a 4, you may discard a Bahamut from your hand to just get a free burn for 7,000. So he's a 9K, so he's going to be aggressive. If they have a lower cost guy in the field, you can just pitch the card for free and deal it 7,000, remove their blocker, guarantee that point of damage. There's a lot of flexibility that this is going to offer, I believe, in red decks, that yes, it does cost 6, but I'm very interested to see in which way this goes. So yes, you are going to want to be playing a Bahamut-centric deck, but as we kind of get into these other Bahamut cards that we're going to talk about a little bit, I think you'll find that they are absolutely worth it. So, you know, not the best legendary in the set, but I would not be shocked to see if this guy can see some play. So probably a 2 of, unless you want to get some spice going with some Fire Ice decks, which is also something to consider, but I like him for what he does. Then we have Scion, which you guys can tell definitely this Final Fantasy VI is going to be absolutely insane. So 3 cost, 7K Brave. That's already fine, like cool. Category 6 forwards other than him gain Brave. Yes, please. When we get to the ice review, we'll absolutely be excited for that. And then Bushido Fang. Now this one I'm not, it's very interesting. Choose a forward at the beginning of your next main phase 1. If he's still on the field, break it. So it's, and there's a Hearthstone card I'm just blanking on now, but it's basically telling your opponent, I'm going to kill this. So you have to either find a way to force and get rid of my guy, which if they're wasting a removal spell, it's probably fine anyways, because he has Brave, so you can attack, get the point of damage in, and then I'll do this, or wait until the end of their turn and then do it, which then gets into the why doesn't this game have end of turn, because it backs it up to their main phase so they can place something else still. But the best time to use this is going to be at your opponent's end of turn. Again, using the term loosely here, because there's no functional end of turn in this game. It pushes them back. It's going to be interesting to see how your opponents play around this. Now, again, automatically want to be playing a 1K buff backup, so it's a 3 AK with Brave, and I think it's definitely pushing it in that right direction. But I think it's an ability that can be very, very strong. It's just going to take the right setup to make it happen, or the right decks. Now, that his special aside, which is again, it's good, don't get me wrong, but it's not my favorite part of the deck of this card itself. But what it allows in the Fire Ice Final Fantasy VI deck to happen, which we're going to be doing a deck spotlight on in the very near future. I'm sure everyone and their mothers is already talking about a Fire and Ice deck, so there should be no surprise there. But it's going to be great, and I know Red Mage Matt is super excited for it, so I'll see if I can get him onto the channel to talk about the deck himself. So more on that in the future. Then we have 2-drop Scholar, put it in the break zone, choose up to 2 forwards, opponent controls, deal them 3,000 damage. Just not a fan of this. It has the trade-up potential. It can do some probably shenanigan things in Fire and Lightning, you know, but I think for how congested your 2-drop backups already are, and the fact that, sure, you might make a case if you're playing Machina, for example, and going for this weird board wipe setup, or if you have a legendary VV you want to work. There's these very niche combos. I shouldn't call them niche because they have more viability than that, but there's these certain combos where you can set this card up where you have to be building for those very specific instances. But outside of that, just not overall impressed with the card. But again, potential, not necessarily sold on it. Ranger, now this to talk about that on the exact opposite spectrum on, you know, cards that require setup that I shouldn't be excited about, but I really am. So Ranger, 3-drop haste. So haste is always nice to see. When he attacks, deal 2,000 damage to all forwards your opponent controls. So this one I really like because it presents a situation where, again, not gonna wood Minwu, that we have a 3-drop 4K. So when he attacks, he can potentially trade up to a 6K. And then again, we're playing Fire, so we have Selfie. We have the Edgar that we talked about earlier. He very easily can trade up to kind of these 8, 9, 10K forwards with the right backups that Red already wants to be using anyways, or Fire in this case. So it could be a surprisingly good card. Now, I will admit I haven't done any theory crafting yet in terms of deck lists for Opus 4 yet, but I think this could absolutely find a home in some of those mono red decks. When you get into dual colors, there's probably some better choices that you're going to be having. Maybe if you want to do like a Fire, Lightning, all haste all the time type of deck, this could absolutely see some play, but I think it's going to be limited to those 2 options. Could be wrong. Definitely excited to see where this goes, and I think this card does have a little bit of a higher ceiling than what we might take at first pass. We have 4-drop Black Mage. When it enters the field, choose up to 2 forwards, deal them 5,000 damage. Again, not that exciting if you're expecting maybe a lot of Golbez decks. If they have, you know, 4,000 to 5,000 power, or the Chocobo decks kind of thing, you can burn those up very easily. But at 4 cost, you know, there's very Red wants to be low to the ground. Fire wants to have a lot of 2-drop backups. Maybe you can finally get rid of Evoker, because I know so many people are still dependent on that. And I shouldn't say dependent, but they love that card. I understand why, because it makes your turns more efficient. But when we get to starting getting to 3 and 4 costs, it's certainly a bit more congested. So maybe as a one of just to have is maybe there's going to be some situations I can craft up where this is going to be good, but I don't see this being like a 4 of staple anytime soon. 4 of 3 of staple anytime soon. Sage, put Sage into the break zone, choose 1 forward you control, it deals damage to a forward this turn, damage increased by 2,000 instead. So what I love about this card is that it doesn't have a cost other than putting itself into the break zone, and it's 2 drops, so you get to see it early. When we talk about Minwu just absolutely being the bane of existence in previous formats for these Fire decks, you're now finding all these tools that say, let's just do more damage. I don't care about pinging your stuff anymore. We're just going to do 1,000 or 2,000 more damage. In combination with the Pollen Party deck that we've talked about previously, there's all these different ways you can get incremental damage, and suddenly your 2 drops are trading with there's 4, 5, and 6 drops, which just puts you ahead on the board because you're having to put in so many fewer resources overall into this plan, and trading up is always going to be great. So this is a card that, again, I'm not going to be convinced that it's a 3 of, probably going to be a 1 to 2 of because it's good in certain situations, and it does break itself. So we've seen these red decks previously where they play, you know, 18 to 20 backups, but 16 of them were 2 drops or something like that. But, you know, of that, you know, 16, like 6 of them were Black Mages or other cards that broke themselves. So you understand why they were kind of playing backups to replace themselves later on. Could very much see that same thing here. Again, I like this card because of the increased damage by clause that it has, and interested to see where it goes. A card that when it was previewed, I just about lost my mind. So as you guys know, monsters are coming to the game. How these work is you pay the cost and they just sit out there with, you know, in the field until you activate whatever their effect might be. You know, they're not forwards, they're not backups, they're just monsters by their own category. And I believe that the comprehensive rules is now finally updated on that. But the short of it is, for monsters that have like a pay effect in them, you know, they don't have the summoning sickness effect, if you will. You can use them right away. So in this case, Goblin, you can just absolutely put him on the field, play something else, give that guy haste and draw a card, which is insane, and go to town. I think Goblin gives red decks absolutely everything that it wants, and even gives the 2-color decks everything that it wants. Can give your guy haste, you can be aggressive, and Goblin's going to replace himself. So 100%, I expect this card to be a minimum 2 of. I would not be surprised if it is a 3 of in a lot of decks. Just having it sit out there is a huge threat for your opponent, where if you're trying to play these games out where your opponent has 1 or 2 blockers up, suddenly then you think, okay, well, what if they play this other forward that I then have to deal with because it has haste and it can put you so far ahead. You need to play this kind of mental game with your opponent. So Goblin, absolutely. Zach, we've already talked about a little bit. 3-drop EX Burst. You get a Cloud or Soldier back from your break zone, add it to your hand. And because we have the Light Cloud, which everyone's seen now thanks to the pre-release, we did a video on it as well, I would fully expect this card to see play in a Fire Earth Final Fantasy VII deck. I think there's absolutely going to be something there. I know a couple people are already talking about it. Low-key, I'm actually very excited for the Jesse backup. Yes, I realize you lose the tutor, but making those 3-drops, 2-drops seems insane to me, but that's for our Earth video. And Zach is going to play a good role in that deck as well, being able to recycle your clouds, being able to EX burst and get another whatever effect you want to get off for cloud, or getting some other soldiers back. There's going to be utility there in getting that value back and be able to kill your opponent's forwards. And it never feels bad to just trade with your light cloud, get it back, and then basically Brynhilde or deal 7,000 damage, something for free on the next turn. So cloud is going to be seeing a lot of play thanks to Zach. Moving on, we have Samurai. If you have received 5 points of damage or more, it gets plus 1,000 power and brave. Very interesting that it's a 4-drop 8k, so it's, you know, fine in that regard stats wise, but you have to be at 5 points of damage or more. So maybe later in the game we will see effects that increase our damage, or, you know, you don't lose the game until you hit 8, whatever it might be. But this isn't necessarily a card that Red really wants to rely on. You want to be the aggressor. You want to be ahead on field, because otherwise you're going to be falling behind very quickly. It's nice to think that this can be a 10k brave when you have the plus 1,000 power backup, so that can be great. But I think this is going to be one of those things where you just really have to wait for it, and it might be a one of, you know, a fun of, if you will, in Red decks to really make it work. Now, you could put this in a Fire Earth kind of Fusoya Cecil deck, Dark Knight, you know, kind of themed deck, if you will. That could be some potential there as well. But outside of that, where you might see it as a 2 to 3 of in that deck, I ultimately think this is going to be a 1 of probably at most. Shadow. There is just an absurd amount of hype around this card. And the fact that it's a hero is just insane. So 4-drop 7k first strike. That's perfectly fine in Red. You have all the ping effects. You have Selfie. You have Edgar now. Final Fantasy VI is going to be nuts. That's all we really need to say. But pay 2 red, remove any card from your hand from the game. Choose 1 for it. Deal 1,000 damage per the cost of that card. So if you are discarding, say, a Dark Sephiroth, you're dealing 8,000 damage. Bahamut, you're dealing 9-drop Bahamut, you're dealing 9,000, what have you. And what's interesting here is you can get really cheeky and say, oh, I'm going to run 3 Dark Sephiroth, or I'm going to run 3 Bahamut just to have them, or insert 3 of expensive card here. The trap that I think some people might fall into is that those cards then are only good if, one, you need them for whatever the effect is. So Dark Sephiroth is obviously going to be great for when you want to destroy a Minwu or a key backup. Bahamut's going to be great when they have, you know, 2 cards you really want to remove. But outside of that, you're kind of limited on what their discard potentials are going to be. Now, of course, in the case of Bahamut, you can just discard for 2 fire CP anyway, so you don't care. Sephiroth can get kind of caught up in your hand. Maybe you're running some other light cards that can just get stuck in your hand as well. If you want to have Ultima, which then only deals 7,000, you know, there's this danger of running light and dark cards. But ultimately, I think for his effect, it's going to give you that extra versatility that you don't care what you're going to be in your hand. You can throw whatever you want, because again, it has first strike. So pitching any card to one of their forwards and having first strike is going to feel great. So Shadow is a card that, you know, the only way that this could have been even better is if it had some kind of S, but this card is absolutely a 2 of, if not 3 of, for most mono fire decks. Probably the same for any deck that's playing fire, just because of how strong this effect can be. I think, again, it's going to be the strongest in mono fire, where you have these kind of ping or bonus effects with Selfie, Belias in a pinch, even though the first strike is redundant in that case, but you get the idea. That is really going to make this card shine. And again, making this an 8k first strike because you have the plus 1,000 power backup, absolutely insane. So Shadow, I think, is going to be a new Red staple, absolutely. 4-drop Bahamut, another card that I am very excited for, because Red finally gets this ability to remove certain cards. Now, Renoa was definitely an issue for the longest of time, which is why you just ran Fire Ice, or you had to run 9-drop Bahamut, which, you had to set it up. It is very expensive. You had to wait till you got to 5 backups in most cases, use it only for the win type of deal. But now Bahamut 4-drop gives you a way to kind of break that stalemate, be able to remove their Renoa from the build, or any problematic Ford. It's just, in my recent memory, Renoa is what comes to mind. And it deals 8,000 damage, which, again, is going to kill enough stuff, that you might be worried about. And then we have the option, with Palm, some of the other backups we already talked about, where you can now turn this 8,000 into a 9,000 or 10,000 very easily if you need to. I mean, putting it with Edgar, now you're dealing 10,000 to anything for the cost of 4 and dulling one of your Fords. That's insane. I think that this is going to be seeing an absolute absurd amount of play. Would be shocked if it's not a 3 of, I should say, in every Mono Fire deck. I will be shocked if it's not a 2 to 3 of in most decks that are splitting the costs. Now, again, you get to the point where, if what I'm Fire Lightning, how many Odins do I run? How many Bahamuts do I run of each one? So there is maybe a bit of deck building consideration that you have to do, but I strongly feel this is a card a lot of people need to look to and consider what are the summons that you're playing and what summons may or may not be better than this card. And again, ultimately, while 8,000 damage it's nice, don't get me wrong, I think the 8,000 damage is extremely relevant, but there's also something to consider about how many Fords are you playing in your local meta where you care about if they go to the break zone or not. Renoa obviously being the biggest one, but maybe your opponent isn't playing those other cards. If Golbaz and you make it plus 1,000 damage, you can remove Golbaz if needed. So there's some consideration that needs to be there as well. But again, huge plus on that card. Now, this is one I think is going to be a very controversial card, Marauder. I personally think that this card is insane, and I've heard some people that say that they just they're very scared of running it because it's only 1,000 power, so it's 2,000 if you're a Mono Fire, and have a backup. But the fact that it becomes a 9k or potential 10k on attacking is enough to make me want to run this card. Now, your opponent might say, or the counter of this card might be, okay, what if they're playing Cyclops? What if they have, insert some random ping card here? If they have the Ice Starter Sid, there's a billion different things that they could have. There's even some new win cards that deal 1,000 or 2,000 damage when they enter play, so that can just ping it off. But, kind of my counter argument to that is you can just discard this card for Fire Crystal points if you kind of know it's going to be a bad matchup anyways. I think the potential positive or the ceiling for this card is just going to be absolutely nuts. So it's a standard unit. I know a lot of people are hype about that. Not that standard units, fire, water standard units, I guess, are necessarily going to be a thing anytime soon, because I know a lot of people are still going to be excited for wind, water standard units based on all the spoilers and what have you. But this card kind of absolutely gets my pick for a lot of people might not be big fans of it, or maybe they are, and I've just been looking, in a very small sample based on some comments I've seen where people haven't really appreciated this card. But I think it's going to be insane in Mono Fire. It's an aggressive 2-drop. Why not run it? I'm absolutely a huge fan. Then we have Bomb. Until on a turn, becomes a 4 with 5,000 power. Put in the break zone, deal 4,000 damage to all Fords. So interesting kind of a, monsters having, we saw Goblin previously, where just put it in the break zone, you get an effect. This guy can now become a 4 potentially, so you can deal damage with it, or you can just sacrifice him off to deal 4,000 damage to all Fords. Now, again, it is all Fords. I want to stress that very importantly, because I know one of the first things I thought about when reading this card is that, oh, cool, I can just have 2 of them on the board. I can be aggressive with them when I need them, or I can just have an 8,000 damage board wipe. Yes, that is going to be affecting my own guys as well. So there are going to be some situations where you can play this to your advantage. We've talked about many times where about kind of this trading up principle where you're going to attack with these smaller guys, threaten the bomb activation, and go about it that way. So it's going to be interesting to see where this card lands. Now, I do believe that people are going to find monsters are very difficult to find room for in a deck. Kind of back when I was first following Final Fantasy, based on the other decks I've seen, decks that had monsters in them would run anywhere between 0 monster cards, and I think the most was 5, maybe 4. So people were very, shy to play with monster cards, or maybe they just weren't a good enough effects at that time. What have you? Don't have that much insight into the Japan meta to kind of at the end, so that's just purely observational. But we have the water cards I'm really excited for, or just water and earth actually monsters just in general. I think there's a lot of really amazing cards that are coming that we'll talk about in a little bit in our next videos. But Bomb, I think, is going to be missing the mark just a little bit for some of the other cards I'd personally want to be playing. Speaking of the other Bomb, Baby Bomb, which is just adorable. So I will say that really quick. The artwork is adorable. Put it in the break zone, choose a 4, deal a 5,000 damage. I love that it's 1 cost. So a 1 cost potential 5,000 burn just to have out there, I think is going to be absolutely amazing. Again, this whole trade up principle, this is fire in a card. It is explosive. It is bomb, ping damage. I love all the flavor that's in this card. Again, do we have room for it? I'm just not quite sure yet if we're going to be finding room for it. I think it's between the two. I'd rather play this bomb over the other one. But again, it's all yet to be seen. And then we have Marsh. Dull 1 active forward. Choose 1 forward blocking Marsh. Deal it damage equal to the power of the dulled forward. So that is a lot to read, I realize. And the joke here is that, yes, you can only dull your own guys for cost. You know, you can't dull your opponent's forward. Yes, I realize that. I say this somewhat jokingly, but there are some kind of misconceptions about that still. And I think we have seen one question already in one of the groups about it. But it's a very interesting card. So you get to, you know, maybe present this trade-up opportunity where you weren't going to attack with one of your guys anyways, maybe activate your bomb, deal additional 5,000 damage for it. So I like what they're doing with this card. I think the 3-drop slot is maybe going to be a little bit difficult to you know, figure out what you want to be running, but it does have, you know, decent stats. 3 cost 7 camming, that's perfectly fine for what it's going to be running. There's a card that we're going to talk about for a little bit later that I will cover, so we'll come back to it. And then we have Sabin. Now this card, whoo, it has a lot of people excited. Enters the field, choose a forward, cannot be broken. So let's just choose himself, give him Goblin, attack with haste. He's an AK, perfectly fine. Gains plus 2,000 power until end of turn, can only use it while he's attacking. So he's very quickly or I should say very easily can become an 11k attacking forward. And then Rising Phoenix, deal 8,000 damage to all forwards. So yes, the downside here being, yeah, it's going to hit your own guys, but it doesn't have a tap effect, so you can use that as soon as he comes into the field. And if you have any other effect that's going to maybe increase that damage, or if they have a bunch of 8Ks, 9K, you can pop one of your backups to, you know, increase the damage to the 9K by 1,000, so it also dies. It's very threatening, and it's scary. Yes, he has to be attacking, so again, you have to set up the Goblin play or just wait a turn, what have you. But I am legitimately scared of this card, and it certainly makes me want to think about what kind of forwards I'm including in a deck, or if I see this come down across the table for me, you better believe I am finding a way to remove it, because again, we do have a couple different ways to find extra copies of him. So yeah, this is a card that and he's a monk, so fire earth, obviously there's going to be some stuff there as well. I think most people are going to be, again, focused on fire ice Final Fantasy VI. At least I'd have to take a wager on. Card's nuts. Card is just absolutely nuts, and I know that all the red mages out there were just screaming when they saw this card, and rightfully so. I think this is absolutely going to be one that we see it being a 3 of. It's absolutely a 3 of in every mono fire deck. Would not be surprised if it's a 3 of in every other deck that's running fire, just because of the potential for it is absurd. And something that, beyond that, it's something that red hasn't really had previously. So that's really the important part of it that I might be underplaying here. The ability to have this very aggressive start, play a Sabin, and be able to come back from a Shantoto and your opponent playing a bunch of stuff, whatever it is, and then being able to Rising Phoenix and get right back into the game for maybe that last couple points of damage that you need. And not to be missed either here is that, again, if they only have 1 or 2 guys, and maybe there's 7k and 8k, you can attack before blocks, Rising Phoenix, and then suddenly you have a point of unblockable damage. So this card just gets all my love, and I'm, again, not at all a red player, as I'm sure many people know by now. I mostly stick to, Wind, Water, and maybe Lightning. But I can absolutely appreciate this card. So I know Red Mage Matt gushed all over this. Probably should have been his card to talk about, but he unfortunately couldn't make it, so I had to step in for him, if you will. Card's nuts. Card's great. What have you. So a card that I am very excited about, and this might be, again, to very early comment I made about cards maybe not being too much work for what you're getting out of it, but Mont Blanc for cost EX Burst comes in the field, get to search your deck for Marsh, add to your hand, and then choose a forward, deal at 2,000 damage. You can only use this ability if you control Marsh in the field. So again, I really love that this presents itself as a very cheap 2,000 damage ping, which, as we've talked about, when you have things like Selfie and you have all these trade-up effects, it can be pretty good for helping you get those 4 or 5 or 6 drops out of the way. However, this is, again, a package that you're gonna have to be dedicating a lot of cards to that just may or may not be worth it. So again, don't know, I think it's definitely worth. I mean, I love Final Fantasy Tactics Advanced, so I'm absolutely going to be brewing with these two just to kind of include them in a deck, because I think it's super awesome. But outside of that, I'm just not sold on it yet, but I can absolutely appreciate the potential to have a threatening 2000 ping. Then we have General Leo. When it attacks, choose a forward, deal 2000 damage, and then Shock for a special, deal 5000 damage to all forwards and opponent controls. So the interesting one here is if you get to live the dream, you can double shock in a turn, which is going to absolutely be a board wipe for your opponent. They're not, you know, deal 10,000 damage to all your opponent's forwards. I don't think they're going to have anything that's often going to survive it. But when he attacks, he gets to deal 2,000. So this I really like in more of the fire lightning kind of builds, where you have all these other, you know, black mages to destroy damage forward. You have heroic Lulu if you want to deal something 5,000. I definitely like the potential that it has for that. But I can again appreciate the shock, and this is one of those things where, like, if you want to get super cheeky with it, you can do shock into bomb or something, and set up a board state that way. Again, cute little 2-card combos that may or may not be good. You know, take that for as you will, but that can definitely help you catch back up in a game as well if you're behind. Again, 3-drop 7k is not terribly you know, cost to power ratio either. 3-drop 8k with your power backup. So mono fire, I like it, the potential for it here. Again, I'm just not sure what all those 3-drops are going to be now because of how congested that spot got with this set alone. And there's a lot of really good 3 and 4 drops in fire now, so looking forward to seeing more of that. And then we have Lednar, I believe how you pronounce that. And this is a very interesting card as well for red. And probably just another underrated and possibly insane card. There's a, you know, a theme from Magic called Death and Taxes, and this absolutely reminds me of that. So whenever it blocks or is blocked, if your opponent doesn't pay 2, so they have to pay the cost, it can to break it, to potentially break it, I should say. Otherwise, it's unbreakable for that turn. And then when it's chosen by a summon or ability, they again have to potentially pay 2, or it cannot be broken that turn. Now again, putting it into break zone or returning it to hand, you know, there's those effects that can get around it or aren't necessarily concerned about what the non-breakability, if you will. But it is a 2-drop 5k that just has another one of those cards that you can play it early, you can be aggressive with it. Your opponent just always has to either discard a card from their hand, you know, or pay 2, and you can set up this kind of a board state where you can, you know, attack with them, then they're going to block, then you're going to selfie, then they're going to do some other effect, and you can really create this attrition war where your opponent is putting all these resources into breaking your 2-drop that you probably don't care about ultimately. So you can play another bit of a mind war with your opponent and try to bait out some of their other resources or summons that they might be relying on. So a card that I think is absolutely going to see play in some number. Again, not sold because it's you know, it's unique. You can't have multiple in the field, no special, what have you, but would not be surprised if it's a solid 2 of in a lot of red decks. And then lastly, we have something we're doing a little bit differently, kind of what card are you most excited for? So the one that I want to talk about again was Goblin. I think that the potential for this card is absolutely insane. And it's not just because of fire. It is a 1 cost, so very easy to get out in the field. And it can give any card you control haste when you play it, and it draws a card, so it's going to replace itself. I absolutely love this for some of those cards like Goblin and Genesis, for example. So suddenly you get to play Genesis, tap something of your opponent's down, use Goblin to give Genesis haste. It's going to draw you a card, and then Genesis is going to dome your opponent and make them discard a card. I am so excited for Fire and Ice as a potential possibility, because we've seen previously where Ice has a lot of key cards that just want to deal damage, or they have some very strong maybe enter the battlefield effect, but then they have to wait a full turn to do something. So Goblin really opens up the door to get potential extra value, if you will, out of those cards. So I am very, very excited to see, again, Goblin obviously is going to go in every red deck, mono fire deck, I should say, ever. But where does it make an appearance outside of that? That is the question that I am most looking forward to seeing answered in the Opus IV meta. So that is our very quick first impressions review. Now, again, I do want to apologize because I'm working on so many things behind the scenes. I generally like to do these videos kind of all in one run, all in a week, but I can only get to these kind of when I can this week and next week, because again, I'm traveling and holidays are always rough. So I will be releasing these videos over the next 2 weeks. And again, I really hope you guys are looking forward to the event in Orlando. So again, the main event will be on Saturday, and Sunday will be a a one-day 1K, as ARG calls them, so that it's going to have a scaling prize pool and all this other great stuff. Again, I am so thankful for ARG to give us the opportunity, and I know you guys really wanted more events, and that's why we kind of are stepping up to the plate and making it happen. So thank you so much for watching, guys. We really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, drop us a like. That helps us out a lot. Comment down below what card you're most excited for. You know, maybe it's not Goblin, maybe it's Final Fantasy VI Fire characters, because what they're going to allow. Let us know in the comments. And of course, subscribe for future Final Fantasy trading card game content. So on behalf of myself and the rest of Six Ages Gaming, thank you so much for watching, guys, and we'll catch you on the next video. Have a good one. This video made possible thanks to the Patreon support of viewers such as yourself. Thank you to our honorary sages.